Thank you and welcome to today's session by Professor Srinivasa. Srinath is a professor and Dean R&D at IIIT Bangalore. All of us here know who he is, what he does. So I'll not take a lot of time just to say that he heads the Web Science Lab at the Institute, and most of his research is around web science, models of the impact of the web on humanity. And within that, he has been working on technology for educational outreach and social empowerment. He has participated in several initiatives for technology enhanced education, and he has been pretty active in the entire academic and research community with his innovative ideas on taking web science forward across the world. So it's a pleasure to have Srinath talk to us about something different from web science, or maybe not entirely different today. Talking about Bangalore and how Bangalore came, something to know more of the history and the contemporary issues, perhaps, that is going on in Bangalore. So thank you, Srinath, for joining, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Amit. And firstly, thanks for inviting me to give this talk in this very unique series of talk series initiated by our social science group in IIITB. And as Professor Amit was saying, this is a very different kind of talk from my usual kind of usual work on data science and web science and so on. But this is something which I've been kind of thinking about for a long time, and yeah. And this is also somewhat a different kind of. This is not exactly a book reading session, although this series is about book reading sessions and so on. This is what you might call a city reading session. So I'm kind of trying to read the city as a book and try to understand what how it came by and so on. Yeah, I've been kind of interested in the history of the city of Bangalore city for a couple of reasons. One is, of course, I'm generally interested in the history of whichever place I live in. I'd like to understand how or why things are the way they are and how we came to be and so on. So that holds true here as well. Second is, I'm also kind of getting more convinced that science and technology is strongly embedded in the culture and worldview in where it is developed and so on, right? And I'm kind of more and more getting convinced that our worldview or approach to understanding the world, there are some very specific features of the way the Asian worldview, if you will, from this region of the world differs from what we typically study as today in school, right? Which kind of came from the European worldview. So that's another area of interest for me. In order to study history of some places, in order to study how people thought and so on. So I'll probably try to bring out some of those elements as well, how people thought rather than what just happened in the past and how the city came to be and so on. Okay. And finally, of course, specifically about Bangalore city itself, I got very interested because I sensed a lot of I sensed a lot of dysphoria. So when people talk about Bangalore city, today we kind of associate the city with the IT scene. So it's called IT city, or maybe traffic jams. Some time ago, people are talking of it as a pub city. And in fact, the first time I heard this, I couldn't relate to it at all, actually. So because I'd never been to a pub, even though I was born and brought up in the city, I'd never been to a pub at all. And once, I remember me and my wife said, okay, a lot of people talk about Bangalore as the city of pubs, so let us go to one. and see what is there. And we went to a pub finally, but we couldn't stay there. The music was so loud. We dropped cutlery and so on, and we couldn't actually stay over there. For so clearly there was a lot of dysphoria, right? And I also remember reading about Bangalore in the travel guide called Lonely Planet. And I was, kind of thinking, is this the city I grew up with? I mean, this doesn't kind of, connect with my lived experience, right? The way I grew up and so on. So there was a lot of dysphoria around what people associated with Bangalore and how we kind of who grew up here experienced the city and so on. Okay, so I'll talk about this dysphoria. In fact, I'll kind of mention this as the split personality disorder of the city and how it came out to be and so on, right? And which I found pretty interesting over as I dug more and more and so on, right? And so yeah, so all that I'd like to kind of I've even heard people saying Bangalore is a city with no history, but I'd like to kind of dispel this myth. In fact, there's a lot more to Bangalore city than malls and pubs, and which are fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with malls and pubs, but there's even much more to Bangalore than all of these. And so so yeah, so let me kind of introduce the city again. So all of you know where Bangalore is and the coordinates of the city, and a lot of people talk about Bangalore weather. And how it is. It's kind of unchanging. It's kind of the same throughout the year with very little differences and so on. There are a lot of reasons for this, and it also has shaped how the city has come to be and so on. So Bangalore is located on in the Deccan Plateau, as you know, and even within the Deccan Plateau, you see this yellowish green kind of area. This is called the Mysore Plateau. It's locally called Karunadu. Karunadu literally means the land of black soil or so on. So Bangalore kind of lies on top of Karunadu, and it has a mean elevation of more than 3,000 feet above sea level, right? And which is incidentally higher than a lot of hill stations. For example, Dehradun or Rishikesh and Haridwar are actually lower in altitude than Bangalore. It's hard to believe it because we kind of associate that with hill stations, but actually Bangalore is at a higher altitude than all of them. So that's what part of the reason why the weather is much cooler in the city. The other part of the reason also is you see that Bangalore is equidistant from both coasts, about 300 plus kilometers, about 310 kilometers to each coast as a crow flies. And so what this also does is in India we get basically two kinds of monsoons. There is a southwest monsoon that comes in around June, July, and so on. There is a southeast monsoon that comes in much later, September, October, and so on, right? And so the southwest monsoon kind of batters the western coast. The southeast monsoon batters the eastern coast. But Bangalore kind of gets the tip of both of them, right? And so we get kind of a fine rain. So just just some kind of light rain for both of them, and the weather remains cool for the entire region, right? And so that's about the geography of Bangalore. And until recently, of course, until the IT boom, Bangalore was a sleepy town. Actually, it was sometimes called the pupils and pensioners' paradise. So people came here to take rest, right? So it was a very slow moving town and so on. And even now, you see some parts of old Bangalore are still quite slow, right? And we like to be kind of laid back and so on. But in the last few years, the last couple of decades, we have seen an explosive growth in the city. And today it is the third largest urban agglomeration in India after the NCR and the Mumbai region. So the National Capital Region and the Mumbai region. Greater Bangalore today is the third largest urban agglomeration with a population of more than 12 million people as of 2021. So, right, and it's still growing at a very rapid pace. So, and it's as you can see, there are a lot of new constructions, new infrastructure, new malls, new buildings coming up, and it's hard to believe that there existed something before, right? And but as we know, that the recorded history of Bangalore itself dates back to at least 9th century CE, Common Era, and with evidence of human settlements dating as far as back to 4000 BCE in this region. So I strongly recommend there is a government history museum on Kasturba Road. It's a very nice place, and so easily it takes about 3 hours to go through the entire museum. But I strongly recommend for those of you interested in history of this region to visit this museum. Okay, so let me kind of talk about the prehistory of Bangalore a little bit. And since quite many years, there have been lots of uh, prehistorical, very ancient artifacts that have been discovered in and around these regions. For example, ancient Roman coins, belonging to Emperor Augustus, Tiberius, Claudius, and so on. They have been excavated as recently as 1965, and even earlier in 1908 and 1891, and so on, in many areas around Bangalore, near Yeshwantpur, current day HL. And there is also a place called Talakadu. We'll come to Talakadu in a moment, near Mysore, where there have also been excavations of Roman mints, mints that are used to mint coins and so on, right? And so there are some unexplained evidences of thriving trade, inter intersea trade, where in which Bangalore is part of, right? And so there seems to be some kind of a global trading character of the town from a long time ago. So, okay. And of course, there have been some more graves and other Stone Age artifacts that have been excavated, places like Siddhapura, Jedgianhalli, and so on, which have been dated back to at least about 4000 BCE. So that's kind of that's how old the history of the city goes to. But then we don't have much records over there. What happened in sense, right? So coming to recorded history. Yeah, okay. So before coming to recorded history, let's also look at the etymology of the city. And of course, you must have sometime or the other, people would have talked about how did the name Bengaluru came by, and what does it mean? What does Bengaluru mean, and so on, right? And there have been lots of stories around it. At least for those of us living in Bangalore, we all have heard of this story, the name called Bemgalla-ooru. So there is a legend of a Hoysala king called Veeraballala, who was lost in the forest, and he came to a hamlet where he was offered some baked beans and so on. So baked beans in Kannada is called as Bendakalu, right? And so he called this place as Bemgalla-ooru, and which kind of became Bengaluru. And so it's a nice legend, but there's not much evidence to that as well. In fact, there are counter evidences to that. The name Bengaluru features much before the Hoysalas, right? The Hoysalas were kind of in the 11th or 12th century CE, while there are some mention of the name Bengaluru even before that, as far away back as 890 CE. So there's also one more theory to this place called Bengavalu, uh, which means basically city of brave guards or something, Bengavalu, and so on. And this was supposed to be the name given during the Western Ganga dynasty time, around 1000 years ago, and so on. But there are actually evidence from inscriptions around that time itself that talk about the name Bengaluru, that actually mention the name Bengaluru, right? And there's one more theory called Benge Mara. So Benge Mara is a kind of tree known for its medicinal properties, and it's found in abundance in these regions, and so it's Benge Mara Uru became Bengaluru, and so on. And But again, there's not much evidence to support this. And in fact, Bengue Mara is not really all that common here. In fact, it's more local to the Kodagu region, right? And so on. So here is something which we have heard, which I find really the plausible name for how the city got its name. But somehow I could not find this in any historical treatise. You can't find it in Wikipedia. You can't find it in any history books and so on. But I think this is still uh, very likely source of the name Bengaluru. Okay, so Bengallu or Bilidu Gallu Bengallu, right? In Kannada, basically means white stone, right, or white granite. And if you see, white granite is actually found in abundance in this area, right? Bangalore literally sits on 3,000 feet of white granite, right? And one of the reasons why most of our metro is overground is that digging tunnels through this white granite is much more difficult, than other places and so on, right? And we also know that there was a vibrant trading character to this town, and Bengaluru was in high demand. So Bemgalla-ooru is basically Bengaluru, right? And there's also another town called Kengal near Chenpatna. I mean, you must have heard of a former chief minister called Kengal Hanumantaya, who built the Vidhan Saudha, right? And so Kengal actually means black stone, right? And this I feel is perhaps the most likely theory as to why or how the city got its name, so, right? And so Bengaluru is actually Bengalla-ooru, right? So this is which I found quite interesting, and this trading nature of this town, we'll see, is uh, it also features in so many different ways, to kind of support this theory. Okay, so let us now move on to the recorded history of the city, and we'll start with about 350 CE or something. So let's go back to the Western Ganga dynasty. That's where our story starts. And the Western Ganga dynasty is a relatively small kingdom. You see, this was how the spread of the kingdom was. They kind of came into prominence after before that there were Pallavas and Pandyas and so on who were ruling this place, and after that the Western Ganga dynasty took over. They're called Western Gangas because there was another Ganga dynasty in Odisha, which is why this Ganga dynasty is called the Western Ganga dynasty. And so, okay, but they were known to be extremely vibrant in terms of promotion of arts, literature, language, and so on, right? And sculptures and so on. In fact, a lot of cultural elements that we ascribe to South Karnataka today, the Mysore region, can be traced back to the Western Ganga dynasty, right? I mean, some of you might have seen the Bahubali or Gomateshwara statue in Shravana Belgola. So they were major patrons of Jaina philosophy, Vaishnava philosophy, Shaiva philosophy, and so on. And a lot of what we attribute to food habits today, and music, and Hale Kannada and so on, right? They all kind of can be ascribed to major strides during the Western Ganga dynasty. So they were major patrons of Kannada and Sanskrit literature and so on. So they first ruled from Kolar, and later on they moved to this place called Talakadu. So this picture is from Talakadu. And for those who don't know, Talakadu is a very interesting place. It is a small town near Mysore. It's on the banks of River Kaveri, and that place actually looks like a desert today, right? There are huge sand dunes. You can actually, ski down the sand dunes. So there are such big sand dunes that are there, and underneath the sand dunes, we can actually see buried temples and a city, and even an entire town over there, right? And so many of these temples were actually buried under sand, and there are a lot of lot of interesting stories and legends about how Talakadu got its, how Talakadu became a desert and so on. When it lies right next to a very fertile region, right? So I won't go into that, but very interesting stories around that. But Talakadu was the center of the Western Ganga dynasty, right? And so during that time, Bengaluru apparently was a small town, but there are no other records to that. But we do have a record referring to this city, which you can find in a small temple in Begur, which is not very far from IIITB, where we are actually. So I've even put a Google map from IIITB to the Begur temple here, Begur Naganatheshwara temple. It's about 24-minute drive. You need to just go towards Manipal County and then cross the Begur Lake and go here. And this is how the temple looks like. And this was built during the time of King Nitimarga in 580 to 625 CE. And very quaint temple, very nice. That's a Basva here and so on. Right? And so why is this temple important? And you see that the temple is in a place. It's in a very crowded place, and it's not. It doesn't seem to be, a major attraction and so on, right? And but this is very significant for us because this temple contains what is called as a Veeragallu. So Veeragallu is where people used to engrave inscriptions in honor of soldiers who have died in battle and so on, right? And erect them in temples and so on. So there is a Veeragallu. So this is an actual photo I took a couple of weeks ago when we went to visit there actually again. And it talks about something called the Bangaloreans Kalaga, right, or the Battle of Bengaluru. And it talks about the death of a person called Buttana Setti, son of Nagatara, and Parvan Shetty and so on. Two brothers who kind of who fought in this battle and died and so on. So this is the earliest known reference to a place called Bengaluru. So what it means is that a town called Bengaluru already existed in as early as 890 CE, right? So this Veeragallu is kind of dated to 890 CE, around this time. So, but again, of course, to note here is Begur is not, at the time, was not part of Bangalore. It is actually referring to Bengaluru, right? So Bengaluru itself was another town which is current day, the Pete areas, Balepete, Cotton Pete, and so on, right? And so around those areas was where Bengaluru was. And around 550 CE, the Western Ganga dynasty, they kind of became a vassal state of the Chalukyas, so who ruled from Badami in North Karnataka today in Belgaum district. And the Chalukyas again were a very vibrant kingdom, and some of these temples, these are not from Bangalore, this is from Haveri and some other places and so on. So they were kind of, so we were part of the Chalukya kingdom as well, but the administration was still handled by the Gangas in this region. And in 753, the Chalukyas were replaced by the Rashtrakutas, again another very vibrant kingdom, which was ruling from Manyaketa. Manyaketa is now called a sleepy town called Malkhed in current day Kalburgi district in Karnataka, again northern Karnataka. And they had a very big reach all the way to central India and so on. And of course, they're very well known for the Ellora caves. So you must have heard about the Kailashnath temple in Ellora, which is a massive temple which is carved out of a mountain actually. So this entire place was a mountain, and this temple was carved out of a mountain from this place. And so they were all kind of relics of the Rashtrakutas and so on. Right? And but of course, during both these times, the Gangas were still in control, and the kind of architecture and the kind of culture, you see, was still in this region, at least, was still primarily from the Gangas. So that's already about 1,200 years old, uh, and then in 1024, that is when the Cholas came to Bangalore. Cholas again are a very interesting empire. They are perhaps the longest ruling dynasty, perhaps in the world, right? And in fact, Cholas ruled for a total of 1,200 years, basically from present day Tamil Nadu and so on, right? And so during that time, they had expanded their kingdom to a lot of present day South Asia, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, many places. They had maritime trade with them, and a lot of eastern coast of India, so Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, and so on. So they were all part of the Chola Empire at some point or the other, and so on, right? And and the Cholas are, they're again known to be very vibrant in terms of their architecture, huge temples all over the place, and so the Cholas, well, they kind of ruled this region, the Bangalore region, for just about a century, actually. They did not rule this region for a long time. For about 92 years or something, they ruled Bangalore before being defeated by the Hoysalas in 1115 AD or something like that. But then during this short period of time they were there, they constructed a lot of temples in Bangalore, many of which still stand to this day. They were responsible for construction and renovation of 15 famous temples in Bangalore and around the place, and many of which can be seen. And after defeating the Gangas, the Cholas actually started a town. It's called Gangaikonda Cholapuram. So it's in present-day Tamil Nadu. Gangaikonda literally means slayer of the Gangas and so on, right? And there are again different interpretations of what Gangaikonda means. And there's one interpretation which says they brought water from the Ganga river, from the north and so on. And but then there's also evidence to show that this town was built after defeating the Gangas and so on, right? And so that's another explanation for this. So, like I was saying, Cholas were responsible for a number of temples, which you can still find around Bangalore. So let us look at some of them. And the next time you want to go around Bangalore, in addition to the malls and so on, you could try visiting some of these very interesting places. The Chokkanatha Swami Temple, it's in present-day Domlur near Indiranagar. You see, if you have gone around Bangalore, you'd probably recognize this region, right? This is the old airport road, and this is the 100-feet road in Indiranagar, and this is the Domlur flyover here. And this is not very far, the Chokkanatha Swami Temple in Indiranagar, right? And so it's dedicated to Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, even though Cholas were primarily Shiva Bhakts. They built a lot of temples for Shiva. But this is a major exception in that. So this temple was primarily meant to cater to the Vaishnava culture. And it apparently also hosted many great Vaishnava scholars, including Ramanujan. Much later, a few centuries later, he is said to have spent a considerable amount of time in the Agrahara, in the region around the temple. So typically in those times, the idea was the temple was a major element, a center of a township, and it kind of supported several parts of society, and so he was part of the ecosystem around the temple, and so right. And another interesting thing to note here is how the main deities in this temple are made from Saligrama stone. Saligrama is a kind of fossilized stone that is found in the Himalayas. And it's very interesting. It actually contains fossils of sea creatures, but it's actually found in very high altitudes in the Himalayas, which kind of talks about how the Himalayan region was at one point in time in geological history was under the sea actually, right? And so it is sourced from the Gandaki River in Nepal. So it's come from there. So this kind of also, at least for me, the way I look at it is it kind of is an evidence against this. There's no this thing called north-south divide that we usually talk about, right? I mean, the kind of cultural elements that made up northern part of the region and the southern part of the region, there are a lot of commonalities in them, right? And so there were references to Gandaki River in Nepal, and not just in India. Even if you go south, if you go to Indonesia, Bali, for example, right? Right after you exit from the Bali airport, you find a big statue of Gatotkacha. Right? It is meant to be. It was supposed to be Gatotkacha's empire, and Gatotkacha, his mother, Hidimba, comes from Manali in North India, right? In Himachal Pradesh and so on. So there's this longish continuity, right? And there's a lot of very deep connections between north and south and so on. Right? And so I kind of take this as an evidence against this so-called north-south divide, and which I didn't think existed in. So that's about the Chokanatha Swami temple. Let's go to the next Chola temple in Bangalore. This is near Alsur. So if you go to the Halsuru metro station, it's just 100 meters from there, right? And if you've seen Lido Theatre, Lido is here, Trinity Church is here, and you just get down at the station, you can take a short walk, and you find this amazingly intricate architecture. And this photo itself, the photo that you see here, this photo itself was taken sometime in the 19th century, 1890s or something, which talks about the Halsur Someshwara temple. And this was built by the Cholas in the 12th century CE, and later maintained by Vijayanagara Empire and others and so on, right? And there's another Kalyani next to this. Kalyani is this place where it's a small step well where you can step down, and there's a pool and so on, right? And that is said to be even much older, dating back to the Ganga era. And again, it's a very nice place. You can go around this very intricate carvings and made from white granite, the Bemgalla-ooru that I was talking about, and highly recommended that you would like to if you would like to visit some. There are other Someshwara temples also. I'll talk about some of them. There is one more Someshwara temple in Agra village, not very far from the outer ring road, near Agra Lake. Again, very similar in nature like this. Yeah. Next, let us come to the Bhoganandeshwara temple. This is near. This is at the foot of the Nandi Hills. I'm sure most of us here at least know Nandi Hills. And it's very famous for its sunrise views. So a lot of students and others, ride up to Nandi Hills in the darkness to witness the sunrise from here and so on. Okay, so, but in addition to being a sunrise point, Nandi Hills has a lot of history to it. There's a fort on Nandi Hills which dates back to the Ganga era. In fact, to be precise, it was built by the Nolamba dynasty, which was subordinate to the Ganga kings during that time. And on the foothills of the Nandi Hills, there is a nice temple called the Bhoganandeshwara temple. This is how the temple looks like. And you can see the Ganga style architecture around this and so on. Okay? But what is also interesting is that there are several layers to this temple. Each of which are characteristic of different dynasties, right? There's a Chola architecture. I don't have a photo on that, unfortunately, but there's a Chola architecture which showcases a throne and umbrella kind of structure over there. This is basically the Vijayanagara architecture. this is the Hoysala architecture and so on. So you can see multiple dynasties signature in this very interesting place, right? Which also kind of again, so we see that the place was renovated by Gangas, Rashtrakutas, Cholas, Hoysalas, Vijayanagara Empire, and so on, right? And so which kind of also talks about how which is very intriguing about what is the role that that what we call temples played in those times and so on, right? And as you can see, even though there were lots of wars and kingdoms taking over other kingdoms and so on, uh, much of these were not ideological wars, in the sense that they were not destroying the temples, they were not destroying the libraries or any other, they were actually maintaining it, right? They're actually adding to the to what was there earlier, right? And which now we can see as several layers of architecture, and each of these architecture, here if you see, each of these kind of showcases entire stories. There are stories of Ramayana, there's stories of Dashavatara, there's stories of Krishna, and all kinds of stories and there are stories of several wars and so on, which are engraved in stone that we can actually see in these. So we can actually see history, several layers of history, literally etched in stone in these places. Yeah, so that's and these are some other Chola era, Ganga and Chola era relics. So each of these are at least 800 to 1,000-year old structures, which are all there, in the middle of the traffic, in the middle of lots of housing and so on. You'll actually find them, and suddenly you'll see that they're actually hundreds or even thousands of years old and so on, right? I talked about Someshwara temple in Agra. In fact, we had lived in this area for a long time. We had not even discovered that it's in a small road somewhere inside, and we kind of chanced upon that, and then learned that this actually dates back to the Chola era, right? And so you can see a lot of Someshwara temples, most of which are coming from Cholas. There is the Anandalingeshwara temple in Anandagiri Hills, dating back to the Gangas and so on. Vasanta Vallabhraya temple is near Isro layout, and Kumaraswamy layout and so on. It's on top of a small hill, again dating back to at least 800 to 900 years old. So a lot of these structures exist, which are actually quite old, but which kind of lose out in the din of the growing city, right? So this is about the Gangas and Cholas. So let us now come to the next era which affected Bangalore city, which is the Hoysala era, right? And the Hoysala era had a huge impact on Karnataka, at least a lot of regions of Karnataka. So this is how the Hoysala dynasty looked like. The Hoysalas ruled from a place called Dwarasamudra, which is present-day Halebeedu. So you must have heard of Belur and Halebeedu temples. And even now, so it's a destroyed town. Halebeedu actually literally means a destroyed old town and so on, right? And so even there you see extremely intricate carvings. So you see some of these carvings like this, right? And very, very intricate, extremely fine grained and so on, right? And most of these were actually made from soapstone, not from granite. Granite is a very hard substance, while soapstone is much more malleable, right? And so most of their temples are actually made from soapstone, and you see some very very intricate carvings from the Hoysalas all over the state, right? Not much exists in Bangalore though, except for the Boganandishwara temple over there. But maybe it's because it's the soapstone was not found in abundance here, but maybe white granite was here and so on. But what I would like to mention about is one of the chief architects of the Hoysala Empire, right? He was a person called Jakanachari. Again, some of you would have heard of this name. There is even a Kannada movie called Amarashilpi Jakanachari and so on. He hails from a town near Tumkur, which is called Kaidala, and he kind of went to Dwarasamudra and so on, and he kind of supervised a lot of these temple architectures and so on, right? And so uh, so if you move out of Bangalore a little bit, for example, to Mandya district, there's a small sleepy town called Hosahololu, and you'll find some extremely intricate temples over there, right? And very very fine carvings in some of these. And of course, there is the Bhoganandeshwara temple, the Uma Maheshwara shrine, and you can see some very intricate carvings here. These all bear the Hoysala signature from them, right? Then in Somnathpura in Mysore district, there's again a very interesting set of carvings. And in fact, if you go there, take a guide along with you, because there are some very nice stories behind some of the sculptures over there, and there are some nice little puzzles that are literally engraved in some of these sculptures. And so there's a puzzle of there's a story about how the Hoysalas were actually Vaishnavas, and they built Krishna statues and so on, but the sculptures were Shaivas, and how they had mixed both of them, right? And how you see multiple characterizations in a given sculpture. So very interesting stories that you can find in the Somnathpura temple in Chennakeshava temple in Somnathpura. Fine. So that was about before Bangalore. So now let us come to the main inflection point in the history of Bangalore, which is the Vijayanagara Empire, right? And I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of the Vijayanagara Empire, which is headquartered in present-day Hampi, in North Karnataka, and which grew to be a very formidable empire in South India. And in fact, in its heydays, at its peak, the Vijayanagara city was the second largest city in the world. Worldwide, it was the second largest city, and it was an extremely affluent empire. And there are so many stories about how in the markets of Vijayanagara, if you go, you could see traders selling precious gemstones, right? Diamonds and rubies and so on by the heap, just like we find people selling fruits and vegetables by the heap, right? You could actually find precious gemstones being sold by the heaps and so on, right? It's a very, very affluent empire, which ruled for more than 300 years, and had a very large influence. And in fact, it was also called the Karnataka Empire, right? And which is the source for the current name called Karnataka. So Vijayanagara Empire was started by two brothers called Harihara and Bukka, and they were kind of guided by the kingmaker called Sage Vidyaranya. And there again a lot of very interesting stories about how they came to start this empire and so on. But what is interesting for us is was this a small town in the Vijayanagara Empire called Yelahanka, right? I mean, of course, now you know where Yelahanka is, and Yelahanka was administered by a local chieftain. He was called Kempe Gowda, right? And so his son Kempe Gowda, he had a vision, right? He had a kind of he was known to be a very strategic thinker and so on, and he had a vision, and he made a proposal to build a planned fortified city around what was existing around Bangalore. So he kind of wanted to convert Bemgalla-ooru into a fortified trading town and so on, right? And so he made a proposal to the Vijayanagara kings, which was accepted. And that brings us to one of the most important figures in the history of Bangalore, which is Kempe Gowda. So, of course, you have heard of the name Kempe Gowda in different places. our main our airport is called Kempe Gowda Airport. The bus stand is called Kempe Gowda bus stand. There's the Kempe Gowda Road, the Kempe Gowda this, and so many things are named after Kempe Gowda, right? And so who was this Kempe Gowda, right? And he was, and why is he so important? And what does it tell us about current day Bangalore and so on, right? And so what is the plan of Kempe Gowda? See, in those times, and even now actually, most urban dwellings were built around or built on the banks of some major river, right? So there are so many cities on the banks of Ganga. There's so many cities on the banks of Krishna, Tungabhadra, and so on, right? And so because water is a major requirement for urban dwellings, right? And but Bangalore has no major river or water source, and it's around this and so. So what Kempe Gowda did was he created what is called as what we still called as a hobli, right? So you must have the lawyers in this among the audience will have heard of this term called kaspa hobli, right? And so hobli basically means a cluster of villages around this thing. So basically what he did was he took a large cluster of villages around this and created a very fine network of lakes, freshwater lakes around this. So more than 1,400 lakes. He created an extensive network of lakes in order to cater for the water needs of the city, right? And they were connected by canals which were called Rajakaluve, right? So even today you'll see in the news sometimes, you'll see that okay, BBMP came and raised down some constructions which were built on Rajakaluve and so on, right? And so this term Rajakaluve comes from Kempe Gowda times, right? And so these were the main feeder canals that connected, that formed this intricate network of lakes, and which supported the water needs for the city, right? And he then built a fortified town. So only some part of the fort remains now, which you can see here. And this is part of the old town here, which was called Bengaluru, and which was called and within this fort there were several marketplaces, right? And they were called petes. Pete means actually market, right? And so even today you can see many of these names, right? Chikpete, Balepete, Nagaratpete, there was a Dodpete, and so on, right? And Upparpete. Right. So all these were actually the petes within this fortified region called Bangalore, right? And the northern part of this fortified wall had a gate here, and this is all remains of the gate over there. And this, for those of you who can recognize this, this is the State Bank of Mysore head office, which is now the State Bank of India, on Kempe Gowda Road, near Majestic. And there is a Kaveri Bhavan at this place and so on. And there's a small temple here. So this temple was basically the Anjaneya temple, which formed the northern entrance to this walled township. And this road led to Yelahanka, right, which is where Kempe Gowda or Kempananja Gowda was ruling from earlier on. So, okay, and there was a wall around this, and there was also a moat. So this is from one of the maps from the British era. And you see the moat around here, so which is where now all of these are basically roads and dwelling areas and so on, right? And most of the fort is gone, right? But most of these places still exist. You see Chikpete, then Balepete, then Dodpete, Nagaratpete, Upparpete, right? The Upparpete police station is where the Majestic Theatre currently is, right? And you see the Bangalore Hobli, or again, this is a map from the British era, which called it Kasba. So the term Kasba came a little later during the time of Tipu Sultan and so on. So which is covering a much larger area around Bangalore, which is where the entire water needs of the city came from, right? And so the source of lakes and the interconnected network of lakes and so on. This was very critical for upkeep of the city. And the city was such a big success, right? That the planned township that he created was such a roaring success, and it became a thriving hub not just for trade, but it also became a art hub, this music hub, and so on. And the Hobli around Bangalore, it was basically supporting a population of 500,000, right? And how big is 500,000? The city of Constantinople, right, present day Istanbul, right, which played a very critical role in the European Silk Route trade and so on, right? And the siege of Constantinople kind of led European powers to kind of find other routes to India and so on, and one of them ended up discovering America and so on, right? And so the city of Constantinople also had the same size of 500,000 people, right? So this was the size of, in relative terms, this was how big the planned city was, and how vibrant it had become, so, right? So and because it was such a roaring success, the capital of Yelahanka was shifted from Yelahanka to Bangalore by Kempe Gowda, right? And Vijayanagara emperors were so pleased with the way this city is roaring. They gifted a lot more villages to Bangalore. And so Halsuru, which is current day Alsur, Begur, Vartur, Jigni, Talagatpura, Kumbalgodu, Kengeri, Banavara, all of these, right? And they were kind of gifted to Kempe Gowda to take care of this thing. And Kempe Gowda also built a lot of important monuments. And of course, some of you may recognize this. This is the Baswangudi temple, current day Baswangudi in southern Bangalore. And there was no township around this time. This was just a small hamlet over there. There's a nice story about Baswangudi literally means bull temple, right? So there was a bull that was raging around the groundnut plantations over there and so on. So there's some very nice stories and some culture called Kadlekai Parishe, or the groundnut festival, which is conducted even to this day in the Baswangudi temple. And you might have also heard of this structure here, the Kempe Gowda Towers. There are 3 of them that are remaining, but while 4 of them were built. So if you go to Lalbagh, for example, or somewhere near Alsur again, there's a small tower like this, small little monument. So these were monuments which were outside of the town of Bangalore, and basically it was estimated that the city will grow until this point. The network of lakes that were there can accommodate a city even if it grows until this point and so on, right? And now, of course, the city has grown much beyond these points, and all 4 of these Kempe Gowda towers are inside Bangalore. You can find one near Mekri Circle as well, in North Bangalore and so on. So, yeah, and in addition to all of these, Kempe Gowda also, and this town was such a roaring success. He took a lot of trouble to also protect this town from outside as well, right? So in the regions surrounding Bangalore, he built several forts, and many of these today are basically popular trekking spots, right? So this is Savandurga Hills, which is near Magadi. And there is Devarayan Durga near Tumkur. Nandi Durga was actually built much earlier, but Kempe Gowda also maintained this. So there are actually 9 such forts he's built. They are called Navadurgas as a collective. Makli Durga is another, which is a well-known trekking spot and very nice views from there. So this will take not more than 1 or 2 hours of driving, and you can go there, and very nice views from all of these hills and old forts and so on. So you can see many of them, right? So yeah, and now you know why Kempe Gowda was such a central figure in the history of Bangalore, right? And there's some very interesting stories about Kempe Gowda as well, right? And so his life itself was far from peaceful, actually. Despite his visionary activities and the enormous success that he got, he also went through a lot of crises, and one of them was he was falsely accused of minting coins, illegally minting coins, right? So the chieftain of Chenapatna apparently, sent out a complaint against Kempe Gowda to the Vijayanagara kings, and so because of that, he was arrested and imprisoned by the kings, and put in the dungeons and so on, right? And so this prompted the citizens of Bangalore to fight for him actually. So they fought for his release for 5 years, and finally succeeded in convincing the king that he was innocent, and he was released after 5 years. And after he was released, he came and created this underground temple, which is called the Gavi Gangadhareshwara temple here, right? This is in present-day Gavipuram near Baswangudi, not very far from Baswangudi temple. So this is a temple which is underground. So you literally have to go under the ground, and you literally have to kind of crawl through parts of the temple. It's so low like this, right? And it kind of representing the dungeon and so on, right? And but what is very interesting about this temple, you see that it has some structures like this which don't look so much like that of a temple, right? And they look more like some astronomical elements and so on, right? And so the way the temple is designed is again somewhat like a ray of hope kind of thing, right? And that on the day of Makar Sankranti, right, in January 15th, even though the deity itself is underground, sunlight falls directly on the deity on Makar Sankranti every day. Every year, right? And so on Makara Sankranti, you'll find that this place is extremely crowded. A lot of people come to this place and so on, right? And just to witness this, right? So there's a small hole somewhere in the rocks, and the deity is kind of illuminated on for a brief period on that day and so on, right? And so that's I again highly recommended if you want to go and visit this temple. Highly recommended that you can visit sometime. And there's one more secret to this. You see that Makar Sankranti is not the solstice, right? Winter solstice, right? So if the sun rays are going to fall directly on Makar Sankranti day, there should be at least one other day in the year where it will fall directly, right? So you can figure out when that time is, and you can go at that time, right, when it's not actually very crowded, right? So another interesting note about Kempe Gowda also was that the people of Bangalore basically felicitated him with a swing and so on, right? And in a small hamlet outside of Bangalore, and that place came to be called as Uyyale Kavalu. Uyyale means swing. And so they had a nice a big function to commemorate his release and so on. And so that place is what we today now know as Vayali Kaval. Right? So some of you know the place called Vayali Kaval near Malleshwara and so on, right? And Sankey Tank. So that place actually used to be called Uyyale Kaval. Okay, so that was the primary. So for Kempe Gowda, I had at least 3 or 4 slides because he's really such a central figure in the history of Bangalore. And but during his time itself, so he died in 1569. But in 1565, there was the Battle of Talikota, which proved very disastrous for the Vijayanagara Empire, and the Deccan Sultanate. There are lots of different kingdoms collectively attacked the Vijayanagara Empire, and at that time, Shivaji, the Maratha Emperor Shivaji, his father Shaji Bhosle, he was actually working for Adil Shah, the Bijapur Sultanate, right? And so he attacked Bangalore, and he kind of took over Bangalore, and Kempe Gowda actually spent his last years in this town called Magadi, which is to the west of Bangalore. So he was forced to retreat from Bangalore and so on. And Bangalore was given as a personal jagir to Shaji Bhosle. Right? And his son, who was Shivaji, who would go on to become the Chhatrapati of the Maratha Empire, right? So everybody knows Shivaji, Chhatrapati Shivaji, and so on. But what we may not know is that his connection to Bangalore, right? He was actually married in Bangalore, and he and his wife spent 2 years in Bangalore before going back, and this was before they started the Maratha Empire. Okay. And the Marathas didn't last for a long time. They were in turn displaced with Mughals, which under the leadership of Aurangzeb, right? And so this was in 1689, and the Marathas shifted even down south to Tanjavur, and so again there are some very interesting stories about the Maratha influence in Tanjavur, the birth of the Sambar, and so on, right? And so very interesting. Legends are around this. Okay, so the Marathas, among the contributions of the Marathas is the Kadamaleshwara temple. It's in Malleshwaram currently, and this was built by the Maratha king Venkoji Rao. And what is interesting also there, of course, you can visit this temple there, and right in front of the temple, you will see another underground temple. Right, there is this other temple here, which was excavated as recently as 1997. So they were actually digging to build an apartment complex, and suddenly they found that there's a very old temple buried underground, right? And they excavated it, and this is how it looks like now. Amazingly peaceful, nice temple. So this is called the Dakshin Mukha Nandi Tirtha Kalyani. So right, and so there's a Basava statue here, and there's some water trickling from here, and so on. Amazing place, very peaceful place, and highly recommended that you go and visit this place in Malleshwaram. So this was also built during the Maratha times. Then came the Mysore kings, the Wodeyars, right? So the Wodeyars were actually consolidating their kingdom from Mysore, and they were actually negotiating with the Marathas to buy the city of Bangalore. So the Bangalore was a very well-known trading town, and they wanted to buy the city of Bangalore. But during that time, in the middle of these negotiations, the Maratha Empire was attacked by Aurangzeb and the Mughal Empire, and so on, right? And the Wodeyars then continued the negotiation with the Mughals, and then they bought the city of Bangalore, and they actually bought it for 3 lakh rupees in 1689, right? And they reconstructed some of the forts and so on. And among their contributions is this nice little temple in KR Road today. It is called the Kote Venkatramana temple, right? So this is the Kote Venkatramana temple. Right next to it is the Tipu Sultan Summer Palace, and very peaceful place again. Very highly recommended. That in the middle of a lot of traffic and so on, you go into this, and you will suddenly come back to history. Then, of course, let me quickly move to the next stage in Bangalore history, which is the Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan era. Right? So both of them, the father and son, primarily ruled for about 30 years, but still had a lot of impact during this. And so, right? So Hyder Ali was a Dalwai, was basically a commander in the army of the Wodeyars, the Krishnaraj Wodeyar. Too, right? And he was born in Devanhalli, near where the present day Bangalore airport is, right? Near that place, and he quickly rose in the ranks of the Mysore emperor, and at one point in time he became the de facto ruler of right? And so he and Tipu Sultan ruled from Srirangapatna, which is an island outside of Mysore, and Wodeyars were basically, just titular kings of the kingdom. So during the time of Hyder Ali, the garden called Lal Bagh was built, right? So the next time you go to Lal Bagh, you know that how it came to be, and so on, right? And the Lal Bagh is also host to one of the Kempe Gowda towers that you see here. Then came Tipu Sultan. So Tipu Sultan, took over from Hyder Ali after his death in 1782, and Tipu kind of stripped the Wodeyars of all powers, and he kind of proclaimed himself as Sultan, and he ambitiously extended his empire, to the south, to the west, and so on. And this is Tipu Sultan's summer palace near KR Road again, which you can visit. And what is Tipu Sultan very well known for is his fight with the British. He actually fought 4 wars with the British, and he lost to the British in the last, fourth Anglo-Mysore War, and so right. And so the British East India Company actually captured Bengaluru Fort in the third Anglo-Mysore War, and established its garrison over there, which is the precursor to the current day Bangalore cantonment that we see today, right? And one of the battlefields of the Anglo-Mysore War is present-day Indiranagar, right, where near Domlur, the hamlet of Domlur, and so. So that was actually a battlefield at one point. So after Tipu Sultan, the British once they won over Tipu Sultan, what they did was they kind of broke the former Wodeyar kingdom into different parts. One part was given to the Nizam, the other was to the Madras presidency, and so on. And the Mysore kingdom itself was given a small part and became what's called as a princely state under the British crown. So princely state basically means that there used to be a British governor general, also called a British resident, who would be overseeing its operations, and military and foreign affairs were taken care of by the British, while local administration was given to the local kings, and so on, right? And so Lieutenant Colonel Barry Close was the British resident for the Mysore Empire, and so on. And in 1831, there was a revolt, and following the revolt, the British took direct control of the Mysore kingdom. But again, in 1876, there was a major famine. So, in fact, these were one of the characteristic features of the British times. There are lots of famines and epidemics around this. And so there was a major famine in 1876. At that time, the current Wodeyar, Chamaraja Wodeyar, who was there, who was also educated in Britain and so on, he managed to convince Britain to give back administrative control back to the Wodeyars. Right? And so Mysore again became a princely state. Right? So at that time, Bangalore, how did it look like? Right. So this is a slightly older map. This map is from 1924, but I want to include this map here for a very specific reason. Right. So this is how Bangalore looked like in under the Mysore princely state. Right. And so you see the British garrison, which was here, went on to form a permanent settlement, which is now the cantonment region here, and the Pete area is here, right? Which was built by Kempe Gowda and so on, right? And in between these two, you see this green patch here, right? Which is basically what is today called as Cubbon Park, right? And so Cubbon Park was the dividing line between two Bangalores that existed actually, right? So this is what I call the split personality disorder for the city, right? So when we say Bangalore, there are actually two Bangalores, and there's one British cantonment-led Bangalore, and there's an older Pete region, which was the local population which lived over here, and so on, right? And and the people from here were not allowed here, and vice versa. In fact, people were going here only to work and had to come back before sunset, like this, right? And same thing from here, right? And so this split personality kind of existed all the way till independence, right? All the way till 1947. There were actually two Bangalores, and literally, right? Yeah, so these are some of the monuments built during the colonial times. So this is the Atara Kacheri, which is the present-day High Court, which was built in 1868. This is the government museum, which I was talking about, which you can visit for a lot of the history. This was built in 1865. The Bangalore Palace was built in 1878. Railway lines first came to Bangalore in 1864, connecting Mysore and Madras. That was the first railway line, and so these were some of the main monuments that came out during the colonial times. And there's another very interesting story about this thing. So you see here in colonial Bangalore, there are two layouts here, right? Which is present day Malleshwaram, and this is Baswan Gudi, right? And so these two were actually established following plague pandemic in the 1890s. So because there was a plague pandemic, there was an urgency to move people away from the Pete areas, right? And so people were relocated from here into these two regions, and these came to be known as one was the Malleshwara, the other is Baswangudi. So, and for those of you who know about this TV series called Malgudi Days, featuring this fictional town called Malgudi in the 80s, right? The name Malgudi actually comes from Malleshwaram and Baswangudi, which is where this kind of okay, and no story of Bangalore would be complete without mentioning about the golden era of the Mysore kingdom, which was during the Krishnaraja Wodeyar IV era, Nalvadi Krishnaraja Wodeyar. Right? He was also called, he was given the title called Rajashri, Rajarshi, basically a sagely king and so on. And during his time, we see a large number of institutions and infrastructure being built, and it was also known for some very dynamic individuals like Sir M. Vishweswaraya, Diwan Mirza Ismail, Diwan Nanjundaya, and so on, right? And the standard of life in Mysore, princely Mysore kingdom was actually much better than the surrounding areas and even several European or American countries and so on. For example, women's right to vote came in the 19th century itself, when even in the US they were not allowed to vote and so on. The State Bank of Mysore, Indian Institute of Science, IISc was actually started by a chance encounter between J.N. Tata and Swami Vivekananda on a ship, and Swami Vivekananda is said to have encouraged J.N. Tata to come and speak to Nalvadi Krishnaraja Wodeyar and to set up the Indian Institute of Science and so on. Right? And so a lot of these were formed during this time. His reign was between 1894 and 1940, and this is also called the Golden Age of the Mysore Kingdom. Yeah, and finally, let us come to post-independence Bangalore. And so post-independence, when states were drawn up based on linguistic boundaries and so on. So the state of Karnataka, at that time it was still called Mysore state, was formed from 5 existing British administered territories as well as princely states and so on, right? So what you see is Karnataka today, had the former Mysore state, Kodagu district, which is Coorg state, Madras presidency, Mangalore and others were part of the Madras presidency. This was part of the Bombay presidency, Hubli, Dharwad and others. And Raichur, Gulbarga and so on were part of the Hyderabad state and so on. Right? So there are actually 5 different former kingdoms came to be formed into the current state of Karnataka. And this is a photo of the construction of Vidhan Sauda, which was built in 1954, Kengal Hanumantaya. And 1949 was when the 2 Bangalores, the Pete area and the cantonment, they merged to form the Bangalore City Corporation and so on. And which was further expanded to the Bangalore Development Authority in 1976. And BMRDA, Bangalore Metropolitan Region Development Authority, was formed in 1986 to develop this region called Greater Bangalore and so on. And the IT story of Bangalore begins in 1985 with Texas Instruments starting the first outsourcing center in Bangalore. Yeah, so that's about it. Let me use the next 2 slides. I won't take much time now. Just to talk about what are some of the current challenges we are facing, and what if you go to a typical Bangalore family, these are some of the things that you would probably hear people debating about, right? And one is, of course, the exploding population, right? See, in 1990, Bangalore was about 4 million. In 2000, it was about 6 million. And 2010, it was about 10 million. And as of 2021, it's about 12 million, right? And that's this huge, very high exploding growth of the population. Not just exploding population, we also see a very skewed population distribution, right? So this is the biggest city in the state of Karnataka, which is almost 12 million, and this is the second biggest city, and this is the third biggest city and so on, right? And now you can see the big skew in the population distribution, right? And so Karnataka is one of the states where there's a very large skew in the population distribution, and there was this recent article on how some parts of the state still suffer from very high malnutrition and so on, and dearth of sufficient urban infrastructure, local trains, suburban trains, and, airports, and so on, right? And so there's a very skewed distribution in population. Right? Then the biggest problem today is water, right? And we don't realize that, but I wonder why. So you see, Kempe Gowda's planned city of network of lakes catered to a population of 500,000. And today we have a population of 12 million, and of these more than 1,400 lakes, only 29 lakes remain. Right? And so this is the state we are in actually. So where does the water come from today? Right. So again, water was a major concern during the British era as well, at which time Sankey Tank and Miller's Tank were constructed. And they also built two major pieces of infrastructure, right? One is there's a dam called Tipkonhalli on the river Arkavati, and there is there's a tap from the Kaveri River, right? So there are two major pipelines feeding Bangalore. So this is the Hobli of Bangalore, and this is how this is. And you see a pipeline coming all the way from here to Bangalore, right? So more than 90 kilometers away and almost 600 feet below, every day water is pumped up to the city. And that is how we get our water, actually, right? And 80% of Bangalore's water supply comes from the Kaveri pipeline today, because Arkavati has dried up. The Tipkonhalli reservoir has dried up, and 80% of it comes from here. And of this, almost 45% of the water is unaccounted. That is, there's supposed leakage or something like that, right? And it costs almost 1 crore rupees every day to pump the water from this to this, right? And so we are literally sitting on a major water crisis for the city, right? And I don't know whether we realize the urgency of this or not. And the lakes in Bangalore, which was once a lifeline of the city, are literally catching fire, right? This is the Belandur Lake near in 2016, which where there was a major fire, right, because of industrial effluents that are killing lakes and contaminating groundwater and so on. And this is the growth of the built-up area in Bangalore over the years. And now, in 2020, it's much more red, than this. The other day, I think Professor Uttam Kumar had talked about this, in much more detail and so on. And so these are kind of the major challenges that we are facing today: water, high population growth, encroachment, and and very skewed population distribution, garbage disposal crisis, and so on. Right, and so it's certainly not an enviable state to be in charge of the city, because the challenges are actually huge. Right? Despite all that, this is the last slide. We can see that Karnataka is actually the second highest contributor to GST collections. This is as of 2019-20. After Maharashtra, Karnataka is the second highest contributor to GST. But of course, there's a lot of lament you will see among the population here that Karnataka doesn't have a good lobby in the center, right? Because there's in terms of infrastructure, in terms of railways and roadways and ports and so on, there's still we are still fighting for suburban train in Bangalore, right? Even though this is the third largest urban agglomeration in the country, we still don't have a good suburban train. The metro trains are not good, and so on, right? And train connectivity in the state itself leaves much to be desired, and so on, right? And so these are the kinds of current day issues that we are facing. At least the way I look at it is, all of these pose enormous research questions also for people like us. Enormous data science questions, technology questions. If we just need to kind of orient and understand the problems here. Currently, what we do is we do a lot of solution probleming, right? We say, okay, we have 5G, that's the solution. Now, what is the problem, right? So we come from a solution and then we fit the problem to the solution. But then I think what we also need to do is to understand the problem like this, from first principles, and then try and build solutions for them, right? And then we can really build vibrant, sustainable ecosystems around this. So yeah, with that, let me end my talk. I just created a small photo album from some of my photos. So all the photos here you see are from in and around Bangalore, which you can do a day trip within and come back within a day and so on. So let me just play this as an ending to my talk. Yeah, this is the Hosaholalu temple in Mandya district. This is the government history museum near Kabun Park, which you can see over there. Vidhan Soda, of course. This is from Devra and Durga near Tumkur. Nice fort and hill station you can visit. This is Savan Durga near Magadi. This is near Chennapatna or Madhur. I think this is from Malur, the Aprameya temple in Malur near Chennapatna. And this is the Banashankari temple on Kanakpura Road. This is the Subramanya temple near Sajjan Rao Circle. This is the Karaga festival. And this is the Kadlekai Parisha I was talking about, the groundnut festival. This is the Banaswadi temple. This is a place called Ramadevara Betta near Ramnagara, where Sholay was filmed, the movie Sholay. This is again the Aprameya temple near Chennapatna, where Purandaradasa has written some work. This is from Kaidala, which is the birthplace of Jakanachari I was talking about. This is Shivan Samudra on the Kaveri River. Same, this is the Bharachuki and Kaveri River. This is the Shimsha River. Talakad. This is Shivgange near Tumkur. It's also Shivgange near Tumkur. This is the Mysore Palace lighting. And, this is again Shivgange. This is the Chamundi Hill temple. Chamundi temple on top of Chamundi Hill. And this is a place called Hosa Kannambadi. This was a town that got submerged under the waters of KRS, and this was the temple that was there, which they rebuilt outside. So this is from there. Okay, so that's about my talk, and I hope you enjoyed the brief historical walk about Bangalore. I'm sorry it took so much time, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have one small question, if it is feasible.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, yeah.
A little controversial, Srinath. The question is, I hear from local Bangaloreans always that Bengaluru changed significantly after the IT revolution and lot of outsiders came in. I never understand the idea of outsiders to a city because cities are formed by migration.
From
You are correct.
outsiders, yeah. Yeah, well, actually, it's not the first time people from outside settled in Bangalore. As you can see, it had been a trading town for a long, long time, and people came from, there were global trade networks even from 1,000 years ago. So it had always been a vibrant melting pot, I should say. I think what is really the main cause of concern is not so much about outsiders or whatever, but the massive growth in population and the dearth of resources like water, right? And water is the major uh, question today, right? And there's no natural source of water and so on. And I think that really, we're a lot of people are missing out on the real issues and focusing only on the social issues, outsiders, insiders, and so on. That's my.
Thank you.
So, thanks a lot, Srinath. That was wonderful. A wonderful historical blending into the contemporary tour of Bangalore. There are a few other. Professor Meenakshi had a question and some comments. There was one more question I had seen from Rashmi. Anyone would want to go and ask? Go ahead and pose the question directly to Professor Srinath.
Hi, sir.
Yeah.
This is Rashmi here.
Yes,
Hi,
please.
Rashmi.
Hi. Sir, so I remember in the 1980s and 90s, when someone talked about Bangalore and city center, it was usually the areas around MG Road or Malleshwaram or
Yeah.
Majestic. Now, Bangalore has grown, as you mentioned, the north extreme is different. The south end is no more south end and stuff like that. So now the city center, if you see in Google Maps and stuff, it actually comes down to Kormangla. But logically, do we have a city center still?
Yeah, well, it all depends on how we define as a center, right? So of course there could be a geographical center, but there are different kinds of centers. There is a business center, for example, the central business district has moved near the MG Road area and so on. There's an industry center. The IT industry is kind of centered near the eastern and southern belt of the city and so on, right? And so I guess there's no one single definition of center, and there are multiple forces that drive a city.
Yeah, Professor Srinath, this is Meenakshi here.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks so much. I thoroughly enjoyed your talk in several aspects, actually. One of the things is, as a person who's been actively learning Kannada, I learned how to pronounce a lot of places, names of places from you in the authentic Kannada way. Thanks so much for that. And I had just two things. One is that typically long ago, when I Googled for Kadu Malleshwara temple, actually Google took me to Kadu Mallikarjuna temple in Malleshwaram. So I just wanted to know, is there a difference or are they the same? Do you know anything about it?
No, I think they're different, but I don't know the exact story. Maybe there are some better experts over here. The Kadu Malleshwara temple, as far as I know, was the temple built by the Marathas. But there was an even earlier temple called the Kadu Mallikarjuna temple. Kadu actually means forest, so it was in the middle of a forest. And
even in Tamil, it means the same.
Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the full history behind that.
Okay, and you did talk about, the bit about IISc history. You talked about the conversation between Swami Vivekananda and this thing. There is also a little known fact about history is that actually Mysore, the state was ruled briefly by Rani Kempananja because I think Maharaja Chamarajendra Wodeyar passed away and his son was still a minor.
Son was still too young.
I don't know how many years Rani ruled, but under the divanship of Seshadri Iyer. That's what they say. And they say that the land for IISc was actually given by the Rani.
Oh, okay. not by the Nalvadi Krishna Wodeyar.
Yeah. Apparently,
Yes.
Rani is under her leadership took the
Yeah,
initiative
I
and
guess
gifted the land.
Nalvadi Krishna Wodeyar was a young boy at that time, I guess. I think,
Yes. I don't know for how many years, but he was a minor. So Rani was ruling but I think Seshadri Iyer was the Diwan, practically the ruler, but the head was Rani, and they say that she gifted the land for IISc.
I see. Very
And
interesting.
another comment about this, you talked about the Pete versus the
the cantonment.
Cantonment area. Even now, if you drive through, let's say, if you go from MG Road to Domlur, you have to drive through part of the military area.
Right.
Along the compound walls, you can see that you can see a board which says that trespassers will be shot.
Short. I know. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
But anyway, thanks a lot. Really enjoyed your talk. Thank you.
So, clearly
Madam,
there were actually two Bangalores, so which merged into
but it
one.
still exists till date.
It still exists, the still exists.
hello, madam. This is Rashmi here again. And yes, Kadu Mallikarjuna and Kadu Malleshwara, they are the same.
Oh, they are the same. Okay, yeah, because
Yes,
the photos that Professor Srinath showed looked a lot like Kadu Mallikarjuna temple.
Yes.
And I was wondering, okay, thank you.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, great. I think any more questions, comments?
Yeah, I'm Dinesha.
Yes, Professor Dinesh.
I thoroughly enjoyed your talk. Okay. In fact, I'm from Bangalore. So you took me through Bangalore, both in terms of the time as well as space. So I wandered around Bangalore in that one, and I could discover a lot of things in terms of time, which I didn't know, in terms of space also. Okay. So thank you very much. It's a wonderful talk. Just one small, whatever you said, addition to that, actually the Krishnaja Wodeyar's time was, it's called as a golden era, it's right. In fact, even in the literature also, see, it was his initiative which essentially brought the Kannada literature to a new phase. They call it as a Navya time, where B.M. Shrikantaya was the one who is the founder of that. And Krishnaraja Wodeyar actually asked him that in 1920, see, we had to sort of unify Kannada and Kannada literature. Okay, and so how to make it big? So one thought was that he said, I will ask you to translate English literature. Okay, but probably that will bring in a lot of new things. Okay, to Kannada literature. So when he was asked to do that, B.M. Shrikantaya, he asked him. He was well known for his Kannada. He's well known for his English. He's well known for his Tamil. Almost 3-4 languages like that. Okay. So what he did was that he decided to bring good literature in a live sense. Even though he was capable of translating any of the old literature, Shakespeare, he did not translate any one of those things. Okay? He translated about 20 poems, which are all probably from unknown people, but still to give a feeling that even you don't have to be a big person to be poetry, to be in literature. Basically, bring in that culture. Okay. Now, in fact, it's called as English Kavanagadu. Okay, a book he wrote, and is on the request of Mysore Maharaja, this thing. And one of the very popular song even today, which is sung in the Bhavagites, is Karunalu Ba Belake.
Karunalu Ba Belake. Yeah, lead kindly light.
It's a translation. Translation from English. Okay.
Correct.
And in fact, it was so good. It seems people said that it's as good as the original, the English one. Okay, so I mean, it could stand on its own as a poetry on its own like that. So this is actually the contribution of Mysore Maharaja. I mean, is a lot of this one. And yeah, I think that's what I just wanted to share. And one more thing also, during that time, I think this KRS was built.
Correct. Yeah.
KRS.
Dam.
Because Mandya was a more what is known as it's a barren land.
Yeah, it was barren and it became
Barren land,
green
actually.
because of KRS. Yeah.
But then once the KRS dam was put in the water, it actually became fertile, and it was actually the sugarcane this thing. Okay? Now, apparently, to build the dam, okay, the Maharanis, the women in the people in the fort.
Yeah, they donated their jewelry and all.
They donated the jewelry, everything to finance for that.
Finance for it was built from his personal funds,
personal
the king's personal funds. Correct. Yeah.
So these are all quite interesting, and probably it's thanks to those people. Today, Kannada is probably both in terms of the literature and in terms of like the first electricity was during that
correct,
time.
correct. Yeah. I didn't talk about that yet, but the first electric street lights were
doing that. And actually, even in I think 1920, even in that time, before Soviet this thing, even before, the concept of planned economy came in.
Correct.
That was this thing. So it's all, and that's what I just wanted to share in that.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Srinath. This is wonderful, and I guess it should be some sort of a compulsory session for anyone who comes to Bangalore, at least IIIT, if not anything else. We should propose this as a compulsory kind of session. Thank you very much. A wonderful session. All of us enjoyed it very much. And thanks for taking of time putting together such a good set of slides and presentation for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. Yeah, thanks very much. Bye-bye.